Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our, I was going to say weekly recap of all things injustice, but it's our weekly Q&A video. This is season 9, episode 53. It's a video / podcast. Links in the description to access this on the major podcasting platforms. But most of you are on YouTube, so I say video because it's easy to forget.
And when it's most, I think the difference is maybe a handful of people differently.
That's true.
So I'm going to point out the background after a long, you won't call it hiatus, a long deviation from this team that we were relying on so much, where we were mixing up and using the challenge characters. We are back to a Flashpoint team because it is a Flashpoint character in challenge, Flashpoint Batman. And it's a bit of a revelation just how fast this team is. Playing the other teams, they were good, they were fun, but this motors through it. And I think I've got a sample of maybe a 5 ultimate that averages just under 27 minutes. So that's a little bit over 5 minutes for an ultimate run. And I mean, it's fine to have one that's quick because you got lucky and you didn't run into the gears and the team compositions that slow it down. But the fact that you can do it for basically 35 fights, averaging just over 5 minutes is
Blistering.
pretty spectacular. Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah.
I think I'll talk a little bit about what I'm playing right now. I've been doing that recently, and I've been playing Persona 4 Golden after having it really strongly recommended to me by a lot of my friends, and having one person even get me a copy of it for my birthday a while back. So I'm just getting around to it, and it's a really interesting game. It's interesting because it's what we've talked about in terms of being able to see different sensibilities in the media that you consume from other places. And I can definitely see it's a very different type of game from what I'm used to. And my only and closest sort of point of comparison for it is another game that came out of Japan. And it feels like, I've talked before about how I really like games like Recettear, which are kind of that like shop management, capitalism.
What's that called?
Game.
Recettear?
Recettear, Recettear, which is this game about running a little item shop, and going into the dungeons, and your father left you in extreme debt to a fairy, and so you have to run an item shop for adventurers, basically, to pay off your debt. And Persona's a really interesting game because it throws an absolute barrage of things at you, and then it just kind of asks you to figure it out. So it's part turn-based RPG with character collection and upgrade mechanic, kind of like, a Pokemon is maybe what you would be the closest comparison for you, where you can like learn moves and upgrade and stuff. But then there's also this like high school social management stuff that you're doing surrounding the actual fighting part of it, and there's like a million different ways you can spend your time, and you're attending school, and there's a schedule, and then there's you're answering questions in school that are these weird esoteric questions that I mostly look up because there are actual benefits to answering them correctly. And when they're like, what's the name of the philosopher who said this, and everything's multiple choice in the game, you're selecting between a list of options. I'm like, I don't know this. I don't know, why I wouldn't look this up. So I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna cheat my way through it. And then there's like a million different little things where you can go fishing. You can, do a capsule machine. You can go watch a movie. You can drink coffee. And
you can watch a movie in a game.
Well, you don't actually watch the movie itself, but there's like it's all about time management, where you can go to part-time jobs to make money. You can learn your skills. You can spend time with your friends to build social bonds with them. And it's all about choosing what thing you want to spend your time on for the best benefit to the game. And then all of this is sort of interlinked with the second half, where you go into dungeons and fight groups of monsters in this like turn-based sort of JRPG combat.
JRPG?
Yeah, which is Japanese RPG.
Japanese. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was not intuitively obvious. I was thinking something. Nationality doesn't seem like the way to organize RPGs.
So I'm finding it really interesting because when I started, it was like incredibly overwhelming. They throw a million things at you, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I don't know what any of this does, you know. And then you need to take sort of time and settle into the loop of it. And then after a certain point, it clicked for me, and I'm really enjoying it now. But I just think that it's interesting because I see what we sort of talked about and I've talked about in previous weeks of the idea that different media and media from different places and made by different types of people, you can see a very different sort of sensibility in how it's supposed to work and what makes it tick and what they're going for, right? What their goal is and how they go about accomplishing it.
Did we talk about that on this, or did we talk about that like in just a regular conversation?
We talked about that on the podcast.
Because I don't remember that. But when you talk about it, what it makes me think of is the physical 100.
Yeah.
And did we talk about it on the podcast?
We did.
Okay. Because that really is it. The way they... It was not off-putting, but it was just jarring.
Yeah.
To listen to have those kind of conversations where they... And I don't know whether it's the translator's issue or whether they were actually talking about stuff that was... Okay,
where there's some of the stuff where you're like, is that happening right now?
Because I must have been half asleep.
You feel like you're missing something.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of cultural stuff that I clearly feel like I'm missing in the way that they handle different topics and talk about things. But this is not as strong a recommendation as I often do when I come and talk about a video game. Right. So I'm enjoying it, but it's not, one of my top video games of all time or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's interesting because a lot of people have, told me to play the game and said, like, the Persona games are really, really, really good. And so I'm getting through the story and I'm liking it. And I've put, it's a very long game. So the fact that I'm sort of in it for the long haul and I'm going to complete it means I definitely at least like it sort of a medium amount, right? Because it's like 60 hours to beat the game. It's not a short game at all.
Right.
But I
would have trouble making half that commitment for a book that I didn't like.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting. It's got a lot of stuff. I think I'm used to experiences in games that feel a lot more minimalist, and especially because I like a lot of sort of indie games and stuff. And even a game like Injustice. Injustice has a lot of stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of systems, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of characters, and there's a lot of nuance in the characters, but the actual thing, the task that's set before you is really, really simple, and you don't need to interface with a lot of different systems. The only thing that I think is maybe hard and big is choosing how to spend your resources, right? There's a lot of stuff to spend your money on, but other than that, most of what you're doing boils down to I'm playing and I'm picking the mode that clearly gives me sort of the best thing that I'm grinding for right now.
So I feel like that makes it easier to onboard people. That's the kind of game that is more welcoming. When there's just too much stuff, it's easy to get turned off early and just stop playing.
But then there's, games that are even a lot sort of tighter than Injustice. Stuff like, more linear story games or certain types of indie games where you get into it very fast. There's like one thing, and there's not like the macro, like upgrade, resource spending, resource accumulation, where it's just play, And those I think are probably the most accessible games and the easiest to onboard people with. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I'm up to right now.
Okay.
Interesting game. So our first two sort of comments that we got,
and we're interpreting them enough to think that they're related because it's not. It's a little bit ambiguous.
And you guys can let us know in the comments if you agree with our reading, because the first one comes from Hun Nam, and they say,
"Isn't that Win?
Win?
Yeah, that's Win.
Sorry, Huynh. Win. Okay.
I think that's Vietnamese.
Yeah. Win would be. And they say, please account me, newbie, and then a frowny face. And then our next comment comes from Maule Parlak, Melihparlak, and they say, please quit Injustice. This game need password. WTF.
Right. So I'm interpreting the second one as saying that they need a password for it, that they want us to quit it so that they can have the account.
Yeah.
Is that an
See, I read this and I had no clue what it meant, and then you said that, and it makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
They're saying, I need the password. Please quit the game. I need a password.
Yeah. And
so that makes sense to me.
So is this a thing? Like, am I just living? Because part of it is I know that I'm not as young and as into all the different kinds of spaces, like you said about culture, right?
Yeah.
And how maybe expectations are different. So is this a thing where people just show up on a channel and ask for something and they get it?
I don't think it actually happens. I think that my guess is that these are probably children. And they are kind of, this is like the mom said it's my turn on the Xbox kind of cajoling of, I want it, so I'm going to ask for it. And I think these are just children that have been allowed to make and use YouTube accounts unsupervised by their parents or guardians.
That's interesting.
That's my guess.
It would be consistent. So it's funny to me, though, because, all right, so what occurs to me now, and I'm making a really funny connection, and I don't know that it's unique enough to really sort of dox myself.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that this is a failing of being able to talk to strangers and talk to people whose motivations you may not understand.
Yeah. And
try to get something to happen, but doing it in such an awkward way to guarantee that it just won't happen.
Yeah.
And I wonder, that's why I was wondering if it's me that's in the wrong space, or whether they're in the wrong space, or whether the interaction, but it's still that same. And the reason why I thought of that, the connection I was making was, so I like reading.
Yeah.
So I like to go to panels where authors discuss stuff, maybe there's a signing afterwards. And I went to one not too long ago. And I think it's an indication of how much better I'm getting at strangers that when I was younger, I think I would have been more likely to ask them questions that would make them uncomfortable or make them want to get rid of me or whatever. But I was able to ask or make a point with an author that was clear enough and was meaningful enough that she ended up making a video a couple of times answering, like just talking about our interaction in a positive way. Yeah. But I know that as a, when I was much younger, that couldn't have happened. Cause I think when I was younger, I think I just maybe needed things more, right?
It's the idea of a parasocial relationship, right? There are people who know you through your work, who can see you, who have access to you, right? Anybody who finds us online can listen to hundreds of hours of us just talking about stuff, right? About our opinions and hear the way we talk and learn sort of how we say things and get to know a little bit about us, right? There's the idea of the fact that you're sort of different when you're making content versus not making content, right? So they don't really get to know you, but they get to know what you put out into the world. And for content like this, and for a lot of people's content, it feels like you get to know the person, even if you don't actually.
Right.
And then
there's an intimacy there.
Yeah.
That's missing something.
Yeah. And that person then goes out in the world, and if they have a chance to interact with you, you are on very uneven footing, right? They know a huge amount about you. Yeah. And you are being exposed to them for the first time. Right? And so I think with the way the internet is, it has brought famous people and it has brought content creators, and I'm separating those two because you can definitely be a content creator that somebody knows and likes without being anywhere near a famous person. Like really sort of close to people emotionally, but in a one-sided relationship. And so people talk about parasocial relationships a ton, but I think one of the things that ends up happening is that to like a kid who's watching us, especially who is just used to sort of talking a certain way to the people around them, when you go on the internet and it's just other people doing stuff and you can just message somebody and have a conversation in a comment section, you just talk to the person the way that you talk to anybody, right? And if you're like, I don't know how old you need to be able to type on your phone, right? To be like have that level of like literacy.
I don't think you even need that.
Yeah, but the misspelling here and like the frowny face means that these people are both clearly typing, right? But at whatever age that is, where you can just like type on a phone and you just go, that person has something, I want it, I'm just gonna ask for it. If they say no, what happens, right? It's like buying a lottery ticket, except there's no cost, right? If that person happens to reply and say, yeah, you can have it, then that's great. That's that's exactly what they wanted. And then if we don't reply, or if you say no, get out of here, whatever, right? Screw you. Then they haven't really lost anything.
That's why it just, when you said it was just somebody young, it rang true a little bit, because the difference between what I'm able to do now, or how I'm able to sort of navigate conversations now compared to before, is that I have more experience and enough to be able to imagine myself in the other person's position.
Yeah.
To be able to think, okay, so would I actually want to have this conversation from the other side?
Yeah.
And you know what? If I don't, I stop myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have better filters now than when I was younger.
Yeah.
So that rings true.
Yeah, but it's just, it's funny, right? Because it's weird that somebody would just message us and say, can I have your account? Can you quit Injustice? I think that one's really funny, because they go to this channel where there's been at least 2 Injustice videos uploaded every week for years. And they say, can you quit the game, please? I want your account.
Yeah. And maybe I'm reading it wrong. I just figured that was my gut reaction. I mean, it's not the most... it's not the most...
It's hard to parse.
Clear. It's more than a little bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyways.
So it's not just me. It's not that this is... I'm not participating properly in social norms that happen on YouTube channels. This is an unrealistic expectation.
I know there are people who like sell accounts for stuff, especially if there's like valuable stuff in it.
I'll sell it. I'll sell an account. $2,000.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
What?
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of work in that account.
Yeah.
I'd sell an account for $2,000.
Yeah. But you know, and I know like people like selling and trading items. I think the sale or exchange of digital goods is definitely something that's a lot more familiar to me than to you.
Right.
But I don't believe that many people give it away for free.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways. So our next question comes from Williams Duran, and they say, hey, I have a question I can't seem to find the answer to.
Duran or Duran? I see that and I think of Duran.
Yeah. Duran.
No, I'm not sure. I'm always curious about the way people pronounce stuff, because again, social norms, not social norms, cultural norms and language norms, where the certain kinds of vowels, when you don't, there's patterns, right? So that you pronounce things that you see a certain way, because that's what's conventional for that language. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So they say, I've seen older Injustice vids and people can make 5,000 points on online battles, but I only make like 1.8 thousand or 2.8 thousand. I don't know how people make so much more.
Yeah. So this is a question that we can answer in sort of the general terms, but what you really need to do is, we did a previous video, I'm going to link it in the description. Yeah. If I remember.
Okay.
But it was MG425, or on Reddit, they're I think MTGY. I got to check on that. But they actually broke the code for literally how to figure out how much battle points you're making. So the maximum is 5,000.
So the really simple answer is more stats. You need more stats on the people you're bringing into the battle. Yeah. Higher elite level, higher level, gold. You need the numbers to be bigger.
Because it's your opponent's numbers that determine what battle points you get. Yeah. And so how do you get higher opponent numbers? You've got to have higher numbers yourself. But it also progresses through each fight. So the longer the ladder, the higher the points are, and the bigger the difference between your first fight and your last fight in terms of how much points you get, until you max out at 5. So at some point, no matter how strong or powerful your opponents are, it's still only the 5,000.
Yeah. So that's the really simple answer. And then the really specific answer is what you were talking about, which is that there's somebody who did all the formulas, so you can figure out exactly how many stats you need to get maximum battle points.
Yeah, and the key to unlocking, we talked about more in the video, was that figuring out that each one person on your team contributes a different amount to the final calculation of how strong your team is. And it goes 60% to the top, 30% to the middle, and 10% to the lowest stat. And it's really just a combination of the attack and health stats.
Yeah. So that's the long and the short of it, is that it's the numbers on the card when they're maxed out, or when you're going into the fight for the attack and health added together, and it's 60, 30, 10.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the real brilliant bit of that scholarship, once you get past figuring that out, is doing all the work and measuring all the thresholds where different point levels kick in. That was a huge amount of work and dedication, and there's no better word for it, scholarship. Yeah. Like, I mean, you're not going to get a degree for it.
It's why the answer to this question is actually more answerable than it has been for a long time. For most of the game's history, we didn't have the precise and great answer, but now we actually do.
Right.
Yeah. So there we go. Our next comment comes from Scott Staker, and they say, is it just me or does Static go crazy when you're fighting him on the AI side? Like, unless you tag out, he puts you in an infinite loop.
Yeah. No, it's almost painful, and it's absolutely brilliant how good Static is sometimes as defense. He does his repeated basic combo, and there's not enough pause after it because I think he doesn't push you back enough so that you're within range for the next thing, and there's not enough lag between when he finishes a combo and can start his next one. And then, if he has 1 bar of power, he just starts stunning you. Mm-hmm. You can't even block. I think it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, not when we get trapped, but I think it's absolutely hilarious when I see it happen.
Yeah.
So one bit of advice I have, like, this is how you approach the game. Like, people always ask us, so what team should I use? And one of those related questions is, what team should I put up for defense?
Yeah.
And you should take the experience that you have of frustration.
Yeah. What do you hate the most?
When you face it on defense, and what works the best against you.
Or I guess not what you hate the most, but what you lose against the most often.
Yeah.
And the problem is the thing that you lose against the most often is probably the thing that you hate the most.
Right.
So you have to become the thing that you hate.
Oh, what's that from? That's a movie or something, right?
I don't know.
Become what you hate.
I'm sure it's a quote from somewhere, yeah.
Okay. So that's why with, say, Static, if you give him power generation gears, because what gets you locked in the loop isn't how much damage he's doing. Yeah. It's that he can stun and basic combo and stun and basic combo, so he does a bunch of damage. That if you give him power generation gear, does a couple combos, all of a sudden he's stunning you again.
Yeah.
Does a couple combos,
Brutal.
And he's stunning you again. Yeah, Arkham Knight Batman, I believe, is the same thing, where he can do his swipe combo over and over and over again, so that at that minimal amount of pause after he's finished his combo, and you try to do something, you can't even block. Like, he just keeps on smacking you. So it's kind of, I mean, I was going to say it's kind of fun. It is funny when you look at it in retrospect, but when I'm in the middle of trying to get through a fight, it's not that funny.
It'll be pretty funny watching it happen to somebody else. But the problem is, because that's not how online works, you have to watch it happen to yourself.
Yeah. It's, yeah. No, so it's not just you, Scott Staker. It is everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what was funny? So WWE Immortals, there was a situation like that where there was, is it Big Country? There was the guy who was like, he had a couple skins, and there was a new loadout with when the gears came out that made them really difficult to fight. And as soon as I realized that, I thought, and once I figured out a strategy to beat them, it wasn't a big deal. But you could still see the people online complaining about how hard it was. Yeah. And I was a bit of a I don't want to say, well, I was a bit difficult at the time. I was happy to troll people and leave a defense team like that. So it would make it difficult for them to get past my team.
Yeah. The only problem that you run into when your team is really like truly annoying and not just
rage quits.
One that you would lose is people can quit out and then you don't get credit for winning the fight. Yeah. So that's
okay, because there's one less competitor that's moving up in the ranks.
That's true. You're not getting more points. You're preventing other people from getting.
That's
points.
right. I mean, that would be just like when in basketball, when you miss a shot, the other team gets a rebound and then they make the shot. They call that a 4-point swing, right? Because it's the difference between you making a shot versus
them making a shot.
Right.
Yeah. And
so I'm okay with that. If it just keeps them from moving up, they're not doing it on my back.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got time. We're actually motoring through these pretty quick.
Yeah, we're just answering them. So this next one comes from Bobby Plate Head, and they say, how do you guys get all these characters leveled up and have all these gear cards? I just grind online and challenges, and it takes forever to get the basics. Never mind all the extra. Any tips would be appreciated.
I don't know that there's a really simple answer. I don't know that there's anything that is really that complicated. It's really the key word there in that question is forever.
Yeah. And
it does. If you want all the Valorium alloy and you're maxing out your Phantom Zone at the top level and doing it every time, it's going to take you more than a year to get enough Valorium alloy for all of the metal characters.
We have a lot of stuff for two reasons. It's because we played a huge amount, and also because we played in a time where there was a lot of glitches that would give you a lot of resources fast. So for a lot of the stuff that you can just get with power credits, that stuff was earned through a mix of sort of blood, sweat, and tears. And also playing and taking advantage of glitches. And then all the stuff that, doesn't really have a glitch associated with it for getting stuff fast. that was just for playing.
Right. So when we talk about like each week and we do the recap and talk about the stuff that doesn't work, remember, those are things that used to work at some point. So you used to be able to finish a multiplayer season, pick one season to do really well, rank up high, and at the end of the season, collect that same reward over and over and over again. Or, even better, get it early. So you rank up really high to get the high value premium reward that week, and just get it a bunch.
Yeah.
So that was like game changing. Like back then, when people were having trouble getting enough shards when they were shattering gears to max out their gear cards.
Yeah.
It was it made such a huge difference. Especially
huge.
So the problem was at the beginning there were a lot more hackers and hacking in a way that was not just bad points up into the rank. They were doing stuff with gear cards that were worth more than they should have been possible. They had abilities that were more than fused level 10.
Yeah.
And without gears yourself, it made it almost impossible to do any kind of, like, it's the same thing, right? Even if you're not giving them defensive points, you're still not ranking up yourself if you're not winning your fights.
Yeah.
So that was way more important to level the playing field. I mean, now there's been so many people playing that any new players are working at a big disadvantage if they start off with the wrong kind of strategy.
For sure.
When I say wrong kind of strategy, I mean trying to use high-level characters without really good gears.
Mm-hmm. That puts you at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
You really, if there's anything for online play that will help you win fights more consistently, it's investing relatively more into gears than other people with the same sort of level of gold cards. Because that makes the fights easier for you. It pushes them in your favor, and it makes them more winnable when you are fighting teams that are better than you in longer ladders. Yeah.
Anything else about that? I think this is see, and there you just saw it. You saw 5 ultimates from the Flashpoint team that completed more than a minute ago, and relatively painless.
Yeah.
It's a pretty spectacular team. I mean,
it's a great team for grinding too, because it's relatively resilient. It's not like it runs into any major hiccups, right?
Right.
It's not hard to win all of your fights.
Right.
Or it's not as hard, I should say.
Right.
Because, everybody has a different level of sort of familiarity with the mechanics.
Right. And what you're seeing, though, is the benefit of gears.
Yeah.
So despite being Elite 5, level 50, they're handling much tougher teams, but they also have sort of optimized gear loadouts for this particular team composition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there we go. I think that's probably a decent place to end it here.
Yep.
So I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza, no nickname Kaden. She just here as herself this week for the shout out. Nothing, doesn't need any gimmick or anything special.
There you go.
Yeah. Shout out to Eliza. And we'd also like to give a huge thanks to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
That would be Korey Ashcraft, supporting us at the top tier Last Word. Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi 127, Drew Chapman, who are supporting us on the credited level, and a few other names that are running by on the screen who were kind enough and generous enough to have supported us during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much all of you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.